House prices are at their peak levels nationally. In just about every single capital city, house prices are at their peak levels.
I feel like on the supply side, there's not really many significant changes that are possible to be made and implemented in a way that could materially change the supply trajectory over this short window.
Yeah, not going to happen.
People have to approve them and build them. That takes forever.
Yes, and even if
AI could fix that, that would actually create the problem.
Rising interest rates, high household debt, really low consumer confidence, and the rising cost of living. All these things are true right now. One more thing is true. House prices are at their peak levels nationally. In just about every single capital city, house prices are at their peak levels. If you're anything like me, when investing in property, it can be scary lumping in that much money to buy a property investment or even buy your own home. You're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, more money than you'll ever earn in a single year, more money than you'll earn potentially in a decade, every single time you go and buy a property in Australia. It's scary. So in this episode, we're gonna debunk things and talk through what will it actually take to break down that wall that is Australian property that seems to just stand up and be resilient and get through anything. What will it take? What will cause a property crash? This is the complete opposite of our previous podcast where we talk through why I think a super boom is going to happen in the years ahead. But I like to play out both scenarios, have a good understanding of what's going on and what will it take for property prices to fall. I want to help navigate my own fears, Curtis. Can you help me?
I can, but yeah, I feel like we've done these in the wrong order because we've just left people on a high if you listen to the last episode, and now we're just going to chop you down with what it would take.
Maybe let's release this one
Release
first.
them the other way?
Yeah, let's release them the other way.
We'll pick you back up. All right, new plan. Yeah.
Okay.
You're going to get the downer first, and then you'll hear the upside in, half an hour if you keep listening.
But riddle me with this. You literally have some of the weirdest data sets at the moment. Everything I said there to start these four things, I got this from Tim Lawless. Tim Lawless, if you ever listen to this, hit me up on LinkedIn. That would be a really kind message to me being like, whoa, the GOAT listens to us. But I got this from you, Tim Lawless. You said these four things, and you also said property prices are at their peak. And I'm like, yeah, that is a bit crazy. The main one I find is consumer confidence really low. This typically correlates with housing demand as well. It has a previous correlation that's being broken. Low consumer confidence. People feel really bad at the moment, but I'm going to go spend hundreds of thousands of dollars buying a house.
Yep. And, the percentage of income that's going to mortgage repayments is really high. The household debt, as a percentage of income is really, really high.
Yep.
So
affordability is at its lowest point.
Basically that's the best way of describing it.
Yep.
Affordability is at its lowest and sentiment is low as well.
Property prices are at their peak though, Curtis.
Exactly. People don't care. People care, but they don't change their behavior.
It's crazy. It is absolutely crazy. So let's start this by going through a little bit of the background to where we are today. So it's October, November 2024. We're on the edge there. We are at a point where property prices are at their peak, but over the past preceding 5 years, we have had everything thrown at us. Australia has had to go through so much. Every Australian has had to go through. The world has gone through so much. And we're in this position today. What have we learned and what learnings can we apply to working out what will it take to cause a property crash? So pandemic clearly doesn't do it.
Yeah.
Let's go there.
Yeah. Well,
slows it down.
Yeah. I would, the way I kind of analyze it or break it down is to split it into supply and demand. Mm-hmm. So from my perspective, if we're talking about, in the boom episode, we were looking at a 3-year time horizon. So if we take a similar time horizon, I feel like on the supply side, there's not really many significant changes that are possible to be made and implemented in a way that could materially change the supply trajectory over this short window. So for me, to get a property crash, prices falling, you need demand falling, basically.
Yes, I agree with that. Yes.
That's the fundamental because your ability to impact supply over a short window is more limited. So you need demand moving backwards. Over maybe 10 years, government policy, you can do things that fundamentally change the equilibrium level of supply that might bring house prices materially lower. But I would say the history of Australia is that doesn't happen. If anything, it's the opposite. So to me, it's what would cause demand to go backwards in a significant way. And I think Australia's history, resilience in the property market, I place that back to the resilience of our economy. You know, we have, whether it's through luck and combination of luck and skill, we have had, compared to a lot of developed nations, an extraordinarily good run over a 20, 30-year window of economic performance where we haven't experienced a downswing to the extent that some other nations have in our economic performance, in our employment market.
Obviously, but we had our recession. We had the COVID recession.
We had
we had our recession. Come on.
That's not a recession.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. But, so a recession. Is that
yeah,
what we have?
Like we haven't experienced that level of economic recession, negative economic performance.
Okay.
And I think in order for demand to go backwards in a big way, they're kind of the conditions you need. You need significant amount of people losing their jobs.
Yep.
You need GDP going backwards. You need really, really poor economic conditions that, people can't own houses. And even people that are thinking of owning houses are seeing prices going backwards and like, I don't know if I actually want to participate in this market. So you've got people removed from the market, not from their own will, just from really, really bad economic conditions. And then you've got the people who can participate not wanting to. And that would get you to a negative demand spiral that could see prices go backwards. But I think that's kind of what you're looking at. What conditions would create that kind of very nasty world to live in? That's what you would need.
Yep. I think you've hit the nail on the head. Everything we have experienced over the last few years, call it the last 10 years, we've had 2 or 3 periods of negative price growth. Definitely 2 periods. So the 2018 period, that was credit controls. The 2022 period, that was the price of credit. So credit can cause prices to fall.
Yep.
But it's unlikely to cause a house price crash because one of those was a 10% national fall, 15% in Sydney, and the other was 7 or 8% in 2022, where many of the capitals didn't really fall at all. They did go, some of them touched backwards. They all stopped growing, or they all had a downward trend, but they didn't actually fall in value, while Sydney and Melbourne led the declines there. And we might be entering, unlikely at a national level, but Sydney and Melbourne potentially entering a little bit of a slowdown now. So we have 2 or 3 periods where house prices have actually fallen, for definitional purposes. 2018 was the closest thing to a crash at least in Sydney. 15% fall in Sydney house prices. It's the highest in 30 or 40 years, absolutely large. That is probably as large as it gets. Will it go further? What could potentially make it go further and cause a proper crash? I think you've hit the nail on the head. The one thing we have not had is a sustained, real
economic downturn,
unemployment issue.
Yes, yeah.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. Okay, cool. I'm back to scared. This is a very real thing to talk about. So we talked about all the conditions that could create a boom. What is the one thing that we have not actually experienced that our resilient brick wall property sector has not actually faced? It hasn't faced a proper unemployment problem in not that I can remember. Not in the last 10 years we've been doing this, and even before then, I don't really think so.
And I think
it's
that's
one test that we haven't faced.
And I think that's, to in my mind, what it takes. Because I feel like even though consumer sentiment is in an all-time low, people still want houses, and you need to have an environment where people still want to own houses. And in order to get a crash, like a nationwide crash, not a specific market that goes down and then bounces back up kind of thing as there's a change. But to have a proper crash, you have to have a circumstance where people don't want to own houses. They're like, owning a house is not a good idea.
This one's particularly scary. So this has to be the real number one reason that could cause it. And the reason why it's scary is it's not only demand. when people lose their job, and I know this better than everyone, anyone who's watched this podcast, listens to this podcast, know that we lost our family home when my parents lost their job. It was only a couple of years later before our own home was for sale. It sucked. It's what happens when job losses happen. People lose their homes. People have heartbreak stories. People have that crappy moment. And I know it as a crappy moment. That's what happens when people lose their job. And that is something that I would say remains untested in Australia, thankfully. Like, I still celebrate those jobs report cards whenever they happen. I'm like, wow, another upward surprise. Am I sad about this? It means higher interest rates. But, oh, wait, more people in jobs. That's good. That's how I feel pretty quickly after I analyze those monthly report cards for the employment prints. But, yeah, I think you're right. There has been no real test of it. What about now? Like, I just talked about 2025 to 2027. Let's talk about, let's unpack this a little bit. Unemployment. This is scary because a lot of my friends are kind of execs and managers now. We're in our mid-30s. We're in our mid-30s, Curtis. Can you believe that? Crazy. Anyway, we're in our mid-30s now. So a lot of our friends who went to uni with us are now being promoted to that manager level and doing really well in their careers. And when I talk to them, when we go out for dinners, sometimes we talk about it. We talk about those call center jobs. So we talk about some of the tough decisions these managers are making. We talk about AI. We talk about the implementation of AI and how it's changing the nature of some workforces and how we're at the precipice of some of that change that's happening. And you can feel a little bit of a sense of fear. And it might be lower value workers, lower income workers, to begin with, that is a bit more replaceable. But the potential is here. Like, well, what do you think of this? This could be a job killer.
Yeah, and I think it's potentially coupled with very, very low economic growth and like soft profit conditions, basically, right? Like if you've got a very, very, if everyone's running and it's very, very profitable and you've got a lot of economic growth, then you're getting your, labor resources, your capital resources, you're deploying everything, right? But if you're in a very, very soft economic growth environment, that's really when I feel like these pressures come to a head, which we have a very soft growth environment now, and we could very easily have an ongoing, very, very soft growth environment for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. I don't think there's anything in the pipeline that people are pointing to that suggests all of a sudden we're going to shoot the lights out. So if we are in a slow growth environment, then return on capital, return on labor, like the choices that get made there, there could definitely be some pressure on the employment market where people are losing their jobs because, one, the growth isn't there to support it, and two, there's a more fundamental shift in the job market where automation and AI is potentially, removing some of those roles.
Booms, though. That should cause a profit boom. If you're like, technically, the businesses are only doing this. If I've just found a way to cut, 10% of my workforce and a huge cost item there, and I'm using this technology that makes me do things quicker and quicker, like this should cause a worldwide productivity boom. That should help business profits at least, and then we have to find a way to recirculate that across to different sectors. But I don't see how that doesn't go hand in hand. Like, if businesses are cutting workers for this particular reason, for this structural change reason, that's a productivity improvement for a business, a significant, an unseen productivity. I mean, like, when computers kicked in or something like that, like when the internet kicked in, something like that. Is it really that big? And will it cause job losses? Because really, the question around this, what will cause a housing crash? Our beginning question, it centers back down to what will cause unemployment to rise materially? Those two questions have the same answer. Like that's a different way to explain the same question. We're getting a bit clearer now when we frame it with this second question. What would cause unemployment to rise materially? Is it just demand? I don't believe the demand story because we've had that for the last 30 years. Demand comes down, the RBA starts cutting rates, we start promoting the economy. Just the natural business cycle in Australia supports it. We'll start adding in population growth in Australia. So I'm not like, we've got 30 years of history here to suggest that, hey, look, we could have unemployment trend upwards a little bit, but a broad business cycle slowdown, we haven't really faced for just general business conditions. We haven't really faced that. So that one, let's put to the side for a little bit. The structural one, that's a new thing, being like, maybe that could cause an unemployment change, but really, I don't know enough about it.
And my instinct on that is I feel like that would more distort housing markets than create a crash. Because I feel like you more have like a 2-speed housing market or 3-speed.
What does
or, whatever people, whoever is in the jobs making the good money, whatever houses they want to buy.
Yeah, you're right about that. Yeah, so it makes... Yeah, so this is why it's so confusing. As of right now, it's really, really confusing because it creates income.
Yeah, but a widespread economic slowdown, that's where you get in a circumstance where you could, if you have a really, really deep recession, everyone's going backwards. Yep. Houses across the board are going backwards. Doesn't matter what market you're in, you don't really want to own the asset or buy it because it's going backwards. And you have a negative demand spiral. If you have a structural shift where some people are big winners and some people are big losers, then I feel like that structural shift would apply to housing. And if you aggregate it nationally, like I don't know where that lands, but I don't think it would be like a flat housing, everything crashes because there would still be people who have a very, very high demand for housing and the capacity to get it. So whatever they're chasing or whatever they're demanding is going to be doing really, really well. And then whatever people aren't demanding or don't have the capacity to demand anymore because of a structural shift in the employment market, like that might tank.
Yes, sector by sector, basically. You're talking about it's a sector, it's an industry sector analysis here. So yeah, I think this is outside the next few year window as well. I might be wrong about this. Our audience, anyone listening on YouTube, I'd love to hear your thoughts, being like, cool, educate us, being like, cool, how does this technology change impact job markets? Love to hear from you because we can circulate it back down to housing markets and where it applies, but the actual fundamentals of how the job market changes and the structure of that associated with AI and technologies, I got no idea. You got much of an idea? We got no idea.
I use us as a proxy. Like the day when we don't rock in to do this podcast and you click a few buttons and AI does our podcast for us, then like...
Make Readham handsome.
Yeah. Then... I don't know, the technology might be a bit short for that, but
Put me in a designer $5,000 suit. Make me look better.
When the podcast can be like done in AI, then maybe that's a sign that there are some structural shifts going on.
Yep.
And we'll hopefully try and find a way that we end up on the right side of it.
That's really funny. I heard this on another podcast yesterday. I was out for a run and the same business owner said the same thing. Being like, augmented reality, that's the most exciting thing ever. Can I do my content via some sort of computer bot that does me? This is me, by the way. Like, this is not augmented reality. Hi, I'm here. Like, it's very, very real. We are here talking live in person. But yes, that is probably a good example. But AI is playing a role in our business. We obviously do a lot of marketing. It is making our business far more efficient. It's making our people more efficient. It's making our written work much better. It's making our people better and improving the quality of services that we deliver for people. But it really is very much of a bolt-on addition to the work that we do. And it's a customer experience improvement across different business facets that we have at the moment. And the marketing side gets a little bit easier. So it might slow employment growth, I guess, in the sense that someone could do a lot of the work for us on some things, help us produce things. But by and large, it's an aid for our business, and that's kind of the way it's fed in. But it is very, very early days here. One cool stat that I've got here for this sectorial analysis that we're talking about here is sectors that can use AI have had 5 times the labor productivity growth in recent years since in the last year than sectors that can't. So this is really driven by the construction industry being abysmally unproductive in recent years, and they would be one of the sectors that aren't very AI driven.
Yep.
But this statistic does hold true. And then we have another area where AI exposed industries have lower job growth potential as well, have had lower job growth. So if you break down sectorial analysis of different sectors of the Australian economy and then break down the job growth in those sectors over the past 12 months, you have some early data that suggests that AI is reducing job growth, which is exactly what we just talked about. It's like in our business, I would say it, can change our ability to
demand for labor, basically. Yeah. Cool. I think that's right. And to me, the high level summary, if we take it back to the initial kind of question, what would it take for a property crash? I think our short summary is it's going to take some kind of employment crash. Okay. Some kind of crash in the employment market. And then you have to build a case to go, okay, how likely is that? What ways can that happen?
Give me the answer to that. How likely is that in the year 2025, 2026?
extremely unlikely would be my read of it. I don't think there's significant changes that would do that, and I don't see a really, really deep economic recession that is going to have business conditions be so bad that eventuates.
I'm going to ignore this AI stuff for a second because we don't know what we're talking about there. But when it comes to the chance of an unemployment type recession event in Australia, I would say much higher. I'm going to go complete opposite to you. I'm going to say much, much higher than most years that we've had, but still extremely low. So I would say, chance of unemployment rising dramatically in 2025, 2026 is higher than usual. It's an elevated risk, using RBA wishy-washy words that they put in all their documents. Elevated risk, but that is coming off very, very low risk and will remain at very,
but
very
like
low
if you're
risk.
doing your modeling and you're like, base case and, what's your extreme example on either end, like I don't know what percentage chance you assign like 8, 9, 10% unemployment, but like it's got to be very, very low percentages. Like, that's a 1% case and your 99 is the rest of the spread kind of thing.
Yes.
So yeah, I think it's sure elevated, but I would say in my view, very, very low chance.
I've got 3 other reasons here. Let's just quick fire these ones and see what your thoughts are. Approvals bonanza. Approvals going up. We're building too many homes.
Next. Not going to happen.
Yeah, not going to happen.
People have to approve them and build them. That takes forever.
Yes. And even if
AI could fix that would actually create the problem. But unfortunately, that's one of the industries that AI has zero impact on.
Yes, I think that the chance of Australia building too many homes is very, very unlikely. And even if we did, I think we'd just flood our country with more people to soak them up very, very quickly, because we'd be like, hey, we've got the infrastructure, we've got the homes, let's bring in more people to go support the economy. I think that's what will happen. So I'm going to put
the
that
same chance as us having too many spin bowlers. No chance.
Oh, that makes me very sad. I was hoping he's talking about the Australian cricket team for those that
never
do not
enough.
follow cricket.
There's never enough.
Curtis and I, we share many things in common other than this podcast and the business. We're also big fans of the Australian cricket team, Liverpool Liverpool supporters as well, for those that want to know a little bit about us. A mining boom, and I don't really know why I put this in there, because I don't think a mining boom actually causes house prices to fall. I think it may cause segmentations. It could cause a bit of a fall in Sydney, and a rise in Perth and Brisbane, and maybe Darwin as well.
I think that's
unlikely to cause a national crash, though.
Yeah, unlikely to cause a national crash, but I would say that's more something to consider if there is a big mining boom, particularly that impacts Western Australia or a market that's very, very separate from the others, then you can get some big distortions. You can have a scenario where the RBA are putting rates up because they set rates nationally. You have very high debt levels in, like Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, low affordability, rising rates. So I think unlikely, but as an investor, that would change the game a little bit and change where you want to put your money. Might not mean you want to put it outside of property, but it might change what location.
The last one I've got here is a climate type event, an asteroid hitting us. Do we care about property prices if that happens?
Maybe.
I'm just going to be very sad.
Yeah. Well, if you want to be really morbid about it, wouldn't it depend on
that's just
how
sad.
many houses get destroyed versus how many people get destroyed as to whether supply or demand falls further?
So essentially...
Or maybe rising sea levels or something wipe out, a whole bunch of nice dwellings that are on the ocean or something. I don't know.
So essentially zombie apocalypse or meteor or massive climate event, something that a shock that we haven't even had. Admittedly, COVID would have been in that same basket here only a few years ago of craziness. So I think the chance of these are very, very low. So we've summed it up as what could cause a property crash. Is a property crash coming? It will be a function of unemployment markets, and both Curtis and I think the chance of that is very unlikely in the next couple of years. And the main risk attached to that I think will be unforeseen, ununderstandable as of right now. That's not even a word, but something that we do not understand, related structural shift to employment markets, because a job is the foundational point to people investing in property and buying homes. That is a message you've heard from us right at the beginning. It is a message you'll continue to hear from us. A job is the starting point to housing demand. Curtis, pleasure.